Union Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman presented Union Budget 2023, calling it a blueprint for India at 100, pegging India's growth at 7%. The Finance Minister introduced big changes in personal tax structures. Let's now take a look at some of the highlights of the budget. The Finance Minister said Indian economy has grown to become the 5th largest economy in the world in the last 9 years. India's growth is the fastest among major economies. Current growth is estimated to be 7%. Outlay for capital spending increased by 33% to 10 trillion rupees. That is $122.29 billion, highest among major economies. Indian economy on the right path. Fiscal deficit is pegged at 5.9%. Gross borrowing at 15.3 trillion rupees.
The world has recognized the Indian economy as a bright star. Our current year's economic growth is estimated to be at 7%. It is notable that this is the highest among all the major economies. This is in spite of the massive slowdown globally caused by COVID-19 and the war. The Indian economy is therefore on the right track, and despite a time of challenges, heading towards a bright future. The fiscal deficit is estimated to be 5.9% of the GDP. In my budget speech for 21-22, I had announced that we plan to continue the path of fiscal consolidation, reaching a fiscal deficit of below 4.5% by 2025-26, with a fairly steady decline over the period. We have adhered to this path, and I reiterate my intention to bring the fiscal deficit below 4.5% of GDP by 2025-26.
And for more on this, we are now being joined by Nadir Godrej, who is the Managing Director of Godrej Industries. Nadir, thank you very much for joining us at this hour on WION World is One, and it's good to see you.
Thank you.
Now, Nadir, we've been asking our experts if the budget 2023 met the expectations. Most of them are saying the budget was good. In your own view, I will ask a different question. Was it inclusive?
Yes, the budget was good, as you mentioned, and yes, it was inclusive. There was a lot of spending for agriculture, which will help India's rural population, on fisheries, on natural fertilizer, on using balanced fertilizer. So, and a lot of emphasis on green technologies and sustainability, which will also help the bottom of the pyramid. As you mentioned, income tax exemptions were increased. Part of this was due to inflation, but it was even bigger than what inflation warranted. So the middle class will also benefit from this, and all Indians will benefit from the growth, though the bottom of the pyramid tends to benefit a little bit less than others, but the agricultural focus will help everyone in India.
Mr. Nadir, let me ask you this, and let's stay on that point. This budget presented keeping the elections in mind, bringing forward some of the politics of this budget. Do you think that it was the right time to present this sort of budget, considering that next year the country is going for an election?
As far as I could see, elections were not a consideration in the budget. There was a lot of capital expenditure. The budget deficit is being steadily reduced, but not by a great deal. And yet, of course, the finance minister is committed to bring it below 4.5% by 25-26. I think the capital expenditure is a very good idea because it will help the economy to grow. And even if the budget deficit is a little bit bigger than expected, I think debt to GDP will actually fall. because the growth rate in the debt is lower than the nominal growth rate of the economy.
Mr. Nadir, experts say that the tax benefits have been, tweaked to encourage individuals to move towards a new tax regime. What would you say about that going forward? You've mentioned expenditure focus on being in the rural areas, welfare, infrastructure, and also energy transition. Do you think India is on the right track to achieve this?
Yes, India seems to be on a very reasonable track. It is doing much better than the rest of the world. The developed world has been challenged by inflation and energy shortages. The developing world, especially the countries that borrowed a lot internationally, have been very badly affected. Some of India's neighbors have been badly affected, like Sri Lanka, Pakistan, and even Bangladesh. But India seems to be in a fairly good position. And it is also, as the leader of the G20 this year, in a position to help out the rest of the world, both by its economic growth and by introducing policies which will ensure sustainability and inclusiveness.
Mr. Nadir, I want us to combine two things. And first of all, I'll ask you, do you think this budget was a green budget? But before you answer that, the union budget has provided a much larger than expected boost to growth-inducing capital spending, while at the same time managing a fair degree of fiscal consolidation. What's your take on that?
Yes, they have done both. But actually, I said, even if fiscal consolidation is not done, as long as growth is promoted, it's good enough. But they have also done some amount of fiscal consolidation, with the deficit falling from 6.4% in the current year to 5.9% in the next year. And they seem to be on a good glide path to reach 4.5 by 25-26. I think the bigger worry for India is the current account deficit, which is not entirely in India's control. We can do a lot to boost our domestic economy, but if the world is in a trouble spot, it is very difficult for us to export. And if energy prices are high, we have to import a lot of energy. Fortunately, energy prices seem to be falling, and that may enable us to bring down the current account deficit as well.
Finally, Mr. Nadir, and I'll go back to the question that I asked and you haven't answered. Was it a green budget, and did it address the common man, the common Indian?
Yes, it did do, as I already answered, it did quite a lot for the common man. And it was indeed a green budget because there's a lot of financing for the energy transition. India has a stated goal of being carbon neutral by 2070 and seems to be on track. It has, in this budget, also had a lot of spending for green hydrogen. And green hydrogen in the form of ammonia can also be exported to the rest of the world. So India will do its best to help the rest of the world. At the same time, we should all strive to do even more than what this budget promises. And Indian industry is certainly committed to reaching these goals even earlier.
I've been talking to the managing director of Godrej Industries. His name is Nadir Godrej. Nadir, thank you very much for giving us time today and for talking to WION.
Thank you, Eric.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.